when you send your loved one to treatment, they don't come home fixed in 30 days. That's just trying to establish, can we get some solid footing?
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of Breaking Down Addiction. I'm your host, Johnny Phillip. This podcast is brought to you by National Addiction Specialists, and we have a very special guest today, Mr. Lee Pepper.
Great. So glad to be here, Johnny.
Thank you, man. Thanks for making the time. You are a consultant. You've done a TED Talk. You're an author, marketing specialist, Ironman ×4. Friend of AA. The list goes on and on. So I'm excited to get into the meat and potatoes and also the fat of your life and just learn more about your background and also gain some knowledge from you too.
Sure,
I am a
absolutely,
marketer.
absolutely.
And we're constantly learning, right? Because marketing changes over the years.
Well, I feel like that's what's so important in the recovery community is that everybody is so willing to share. And I think that was somebody, Joey Darby, a good friend of mine at Cumberland Heights, he's like me. They call us normies. And I always felt weird being called a normie. I'm like, what am I, really?
Yeah.
And I feel like that was one of the things that the recovery community just poured into me. And I think I told you earlier, my first open meeting, was here in Brentwood at the United Methodist Church. And I mean,
I've been to that
Yeah.
one.
And I don't know how many, it was eye-opening for me. And this is many, many years ago. And I feel like that's how I really became a friend of AA and so supportive of the recovery community.
Well, what have you learned being in those rooms about addiction and recovery? Like, what's some of those things that you...
I think the first thing, Johnny, I had a very unusual childhood in that I was not exposed to drugs and alcohol, and it's very, when I think back about it and I see like what my kids have grown up and been exposed to that at a much younger age than I was.
And this is not even coming from your family's side too?
Well, yeah, it just wasn't something that was available, in my household and even extended families, going and visiting grandparents and aunts and uncles. And so I think part of it was because I grew up in a military family. So my dad was active duty. And I think my mom, she used to say, oh, well, she had an uncle that was an alcoholic. And so she was always very, cautious about drugs and alcohol, but it really was just abstinence. And for whatever reason, I just didn't really ever push the boundaries about it. It just was, if somebody offered me, back then in the 80s, somebody offered me, marijuana, in the locker room, it just wasn't something I was ever even interested in, and so maybe it was just kind of some interesting circumstances that happened. And anyway, and so what I learned in the rooms, going into the rooms was, boy, there's a lot of judgment. And so I think that helped reinforce in me personally that I really had to make sure that I was approaching everybody in every situation without judgment, because you just don't understand. Like, I thought I had a kind of a normal childhood, but I had an abnormal childhood, not being exposed to everything that I was exposed to. So I think that was the first thing that I learned in the rooms.
So you say judgment. Go into that a little bit more. Like, what did you experience?
Well, I think it's really easy for people that grow up in these kind of situations where they may not have experienced trauma, where they may not have had a dysfunctional home life, they may not have had challenges, that we somehow think that it's a lot more personal decision in somebody's need to, use drugs and alcohol. And so we can kind of take a high road and we can be like, oh, look how good we are. And, oh, you're just making bad decisions.
Right. Like if you go into a low income neighborhood, you'll see a lot of bars, liquor stores, cigarette signs.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's designed for comfort for those people.
Absolutely.
And
so it's really easy as a normie to say, well, they're just making bad decisions.
Yeah.
And I think that when you go into the rooms and you hear the stories, because that was one thing I love hearing. John Southworth and Brian O'Shea were two people that I attended a lot of open meetings with, and to be able to hear the stories, it really opened your eyes that there's a whole nother world that you as a normie might think is not out there, that's out there,
right?
And that you're the minority,
and you're learning this through immersion, then.
right? And I think, Johnny, and I'm sure we'll get into this too, my dad was 26 years career Army. I served 8 years, in the Army,
Thank you
mainly in
for
the
your
reserves.
service.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And, I remember that first day in basic training, all of a sudden, you're just white middle-class kid, from Tennessee, and you show up to basic training and you're the minority. Again, you're the minority.
Yeah.
I was there with a lot of kids from Puerto Rico. I was there with gang members from Dallas. And all of a sudden, so it kind of, I think it kind of fits in where I kind of learned very early to not have judgment. And I think being at that first meeting in Brentwood, I think it really just helped kind of encourage me to kind of keep going down that path.
Yeah. How was basic training for you, that experience?
For me, I mean, I will say it's a good experience. People laugh. I mean, obviously it's hard. But I think it was one of those things where it gave me a lot of confidence. Because when you go and do something like that, you really develop some confidence and not just being cocky about everything.
You can overcome that circumstance or challenge.
When you go through basic training, maybe it's like going through rehab, but you come out and you go, I did something. But no, you really do feel like that you have really accomplished something in those 2 months, 8 weeks. And then now basic training is 10 weeks because my youngest son just is in the Army and just finished his basic training. But you really do come out and feel like I can do anything. Yeah.
After basic, where did you move from there?
So after basic training, I was in Fort Jackson, South Carolina, and this is in 1988 when I enlisted. So I had gone to college, the University of Tennessee. I had finished my freshman year, and I had tried to enlist right out of high school, but I'd had some medical issues as a kid, so I had to get a waiver. So that had taken a year to get that process through the military, and so I was able to get that. And then I then took basically a year off of college to go through basic training at AIT, and then I went to Air Assault School at Fort Campbell. Then when I finished that, I went back, re-enrolled at UT to continue my education, and then I was serving in the reserves. And my unit was the 49th Civil Affairs Unit there in Knoxville. And they were right on the campus, so it was really easy for me to go to class and then do my reserve service. And then I was able to get selected for officer candidate school a year before I graduated college. I don't know if they still do it, but back then you could apply the year before you graduated. And so I did that, graduated from OCS, got commissioned as a second lieutenant, and then took off another 6 months or another semester to go to officer basic course. And so I did armor school at Fort Knox, Kentucky, and then finished that up, and then finished up my graduated from UT, and then that's what then led me to got my first job working for Ross Perot right after I graduated.
And we're going to get into
that,
absolutely. Where does starting to work in recovery fit in here, and how did that happen?
Yeah, I started working in recovery in 2008. So this was, a good 12 years after I started working for Mr. Perot, and then, finished up my service. And I was the first chief information officer at Foundations Recovery Network. So they were a small nonprofit here in Nashville, and they had just decided to take some private equity money from a company called Sterling Partners in Chicago. And part of the deal was they needed to hire a whole C-suite. They needed a CFO, a COO, a CIO. So they hired me as a CIO. And back then, the chief information officer was in charge of the websites, was in charge of the nascent digital marketing and social media. And that's where I had more interest in that. I still was responsible for the servers, the networks, the printers, the help desk, all of that. But I really was more focused, on the digital marketing side. Okay. And because back then the chief marketing officers were like just business development, and maybe Yellow Pages.
Yeah. I mean, it's such a different game back then.
Yeah. But it was right when things were shifting to where digital marketing was really starting to lead the way, and you had this transition period.
Well, you start working in recovery at this point, and you listen to upward of over 10,000 phone calls with family members, patients. What do some treatment centers or most treatment centers get wrong about that first call?
Wow. There's so many. I mean, and that's why I think, when you introduced me, you led with consultant, and I do a lot of consulting. And most of the time people call me because they have a marketing problem. When you reach out to me, you've got some question, you're not sure what's going on. And invariably, you have to listen to the phone calls to really understand if you have a marketing problem, what that marketing problem might be. So that's why I've listened to so many phone calls. But what most centers get wrong is that I think they make assumptions into the quality of the training of the staff they hired. They hire really good people most of the time, but they don't train them. And so
Training is a big issue.
Oh, they totally miss out on the training. They assume that just because you graduated from college with a degree or you graduated from the program or you're in recovery that you know everything. And what they failed to miss out on is that there are some fundamental ways that you have to handle calls. And there's things like, when somebody first calls in, they'll say, well, how much are you? That's a typical question from a caller, either the person in active recovery or a family or loved one. That's the first thing they'll ask. Well, how much do you cost, or where are you located? And what we assume without training is that we have to answer that question.
Yeah.
The truth is, the reason that the caller is asking that question is they don't know what else to ask.
Right.
And it also, that phone is so heavy. And for that person to actually reach out and make the call says a lot. So the first thing,
difficult situation.
is so difficult. And it's many years building up.
Yeah.
So for the call center person to answer that question, how much do you cost, as an example, just to give them the price, is a big mistake, because they need to acknowledge what has just happened. Like, you have really done something heroic, either for yourself or your family. So you need to acknowledge that. And you need to let them know that we'll get to the price. We don't even know if we can help you yet.
Right.
And for programs that have multiple levels of care, we need to determine what it is they're struggling with before we can even make a recommendation. So we'll get to the cost, or we'll get to the location, or we'll get to the level of care. But first, I need to know about you or your family situation. What's going on? And so I think most of the time when I do my trainings, and all of a sudden when you do that, the marketing problems start going away, because guess what? Most of the time the marketing is working. There are phone calls being generated. The issue is how they're being handled and triaged. And there is a difference in a business development relationship. So like, I met you through a relationship. Well, people who are calling your program through a relationship with you, they're a little bit more educated. They're more teed up.
Right.
So it's a little bit, so now the level of service is more concierge versus somebody who's discovering you on the internet, who's maybe at the top of the funnel. They haven't quite done. So your people answering the phones, they need to understand all this. And that's where the training comes in.
Yeah, and that's the perfect example and response here. I think a big missing piece with this training is that the patient calling, making that first step, it's not a one size fits all. Because if this patient's calling needing X, Y, and Z that is different from a whole nother patient, instead of saying, no, we can't do that, or yes, we can do that, the training should be, I'm not sure. Let me speak to my supervisor, because I want to make sure this is going to work for the best of both parties.
Absolutely.
This is your life here.
Absolutely. I have a thing, Johnny, that I say that if you're talking, you're selling. If you're listening, you're caring. And that's where, a lot of times when centers get involved with me, one of the first things I look at is talk time. I want to, because, in today's day and age, you can use CallRail or CTM or Invoca, and you can see how much the caller is talking versus how much the agent or the counselor is talking. And when I see that the agent or the counselor is talking more than 50%, I know there's a problem right there. I don't even have to listen to a call yet. I know that they're talking too much, because I need to let the caller do most of the talking so that I can learn and pick up things, which is going to help me get to the point of making a recommendation.
Exactly.
Yeah, I have to listen. I have to consider options. Then I make the recommendation. I hear a lot of times when people engage with me, they're making recommendations within the first 5 minutes of the call, and they're doing it solely on the insurance.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Solely on the insurance.
Crazy to me.
And that is a big problem, because then you create all sorts of issues for your clinical team. Because if you've made that decision based on the insurance, what the insurance will pay, all of a sudden they show up and your milieu gets disrupted and you wonder why.
Right.
or people AMA and you wonder why. Well, it all starts there.
At the beginning.
Yeah.
On the front end.
Yeah.
So you've been part of multiple marketing teams, worked for foundations. Foundations Recovery Network had 60 times the growth when you were there. What strategic steps were taken to reach that kind of growth?
Well, I think the first thing was that we identified, this is in 2008, so Yellow Pages was our #1 marketing spend when I got there.
That's just wild you say
It's
that.
crazy.
It's really cool.
They were spending $1 million a year on Yellow Pages, and I was new, but I started, we started tracking and tagging all the calls. That was part of the CIO's responsibility. And I could quickly understand that, how is it that we're spending all this money on Yellow Pages, very little on digital and not that much on business development? Why is Yellow Pages when I could see all the calls were coming from digital or from relationships?
Okay.
And so once I put that data together, I was able to then convince the board, because I had the proof that the Yellow Pages is not working for us like you think it is, because the data is there. And that's where I tell a lot of companies today, it's like there's so much data out there, you can figure it out. Even if you have to use Excel, to track things, you can figure it out. This is not some kind of, it was more difficult back in 2008, when all of this automation was just starting to come up. But that was the first thing, was that we had a board. Rob Wagner was our COO and promoted to CEO. But we had people that were very data driven, and we weren't making decisions just subjectively,
willy-nilly.
Yes,
if you will.
Yeah.
And also, so the Yellow Pages aren't working. So I think that some of these treatment centers, present day, maybe they're living and dying on this hill of one thing that they think is working and it's not working. So you're figuring out those issues
absolutely
right away, the things that are not working.
Yeah, because, and again, it's getting the data. Because to be honest with you, if the Yellow Page was working great, I wouldn't have cared. But I had to know that we only have finite dollars in this space. And recovery, it's expensive. It's not, and so we have to be very judicious with the marketing spend, because if we're not, we're all of a sudden going to jack up the prices, or we're going to take dollars away from clinical. We're going to take dollars away from the alumni teams. And that would hurt our treatment model. And so that was something that was really, I think that's why it's important to have an in-house team. I mean, we always used, we had different agencies that would help us do things, but we had an in-house team. Yeah. And so when you're in the office, when you're going to events, when you're going to open meetings together, you have this passion for the client. And I think that's sometimes what some centers can miss. And certainly I've always felt, and I think it's still that way today, that the #1 competitor that most treatment centers have is not the center down the street. It's these national online marketing companies that basically sell the lead. That's who we're really competing with.
Okay.
And Legit Scripts has not solved that problem completely. And so I think that today is like, I'm a big believer that when somebody would call into foundations and they weren't a good fit for me, I wanted to get them to Cumberland Heights. I wanted to get them to Journey Pure.
To the best partnership for that person. Possible.
Yes. It helps solve my problem of, when you're working in an admissions center or a marketing team, and if you're getting 100 phone calls, we were wildly successful with between a 3% and 5% conversion rate.
Wow.
But think about what that does to you psychologically when you're answering the phone all day, or you've got even your blog writers are writing content, your web developers are building websites, and they know that for every 100 calls, 95 people got turned away.
Yeah.
Like
all these leads that you're paying money for are dead.
Yeah. And so anything we could do to get those family members or that caller to somewhere that could help is a win, even if it doesn't come back to us. And so and that was why we were so successful with our conferences. We did 4 national conferences a year. We had our Heroes in Recovery movement. People saw that it wasn't just about fill our beds. It was really about, can we help that person calling? And we hope that we can help them, and we're going to do everything we can to do that.
Totally.
But even on our best day, we're at 5%. We still got 95 people we can't help. What are we going to do? We can't just say call Samsha, because that's what a lot of places
here's
do.
This 800 number.
Yeah.
I think with growing at that kind of rate, you also have to keep up with that growth, because it's great if somebody wants 1,000 more patients per year, great. What are you going to do and implement to handle that growth properly?
Mm-hmm.
Because all of those people are going to need that same
Mm-hmm.
level of treatment
Mm-hmm.
coming through your doors. So thank you
Well,
for all those talking
we were
points.
super lucky. I'll tell you, John, we were super lucky that with Foundations, we had two amazing private equity sponsors. Sterling Partners in Chicago. They were the first. They were super supportive in the mission, and then the Pritzkers. It's a family fund, super supportive. So like when we had an issue in Memphis at La Paloma, which was 72 beds, dual license, mental health and substance use, which is unusual in the United States that you could do a dual license. But when we had the need to spend some money on capital, when we were starting having some problems, people were turning away. They, the facility needed some work. We were able to get that. It was over $1 million that we invested in a few months to kind of bring that facility up. And that sometimes I feel like is hard to do with private equity.
Oh, yeah.
Because they might not understand like what that return's going to be.
Exactly.
But we had really good partners that saw the longer term vision that we needed to invest. That redoing the basketball court is not an amenity. Like, no, that's actually part of the treatment that they're getting, is that they have to have a good exercise program, and that we need to bring in new weight sets, and that we needed to create a park like environment. They really understood how that really ties in to the therapeutic model that's there.
So you were just telling these private investors that, like, we got you on this ROI.
Yeah, they could see the longer term vision, and we were able to, with the marketing side. I think a lot of times people feel like marketing is a black box. Well, I'm spending all this marketing money, but I don't know what I'm getting.
Right.
That was not the case with us. I mean, we had it dialed in, and it's not that every channel was successful at the same rate. I would say that, like for us, the most beneficial channel was alumni, and so
I worked an alumni program once, and when I started, the reentry percentage was 30%. When I finished, it was 40%.
Yeah. Well, and see, Betty Ford is like that. Betty Ford has like a 40% alumni. That's your cheapest and your best. Mm-hmm. But guess what? You have to still put hard dollars into it.
Totally.
And that was where our Heroes program came in. You can't just assume they're going to. And then our next best was business development, and then natural search, SEO. And then our most expensive was paid search. We still did it because we needed, but we were tracking everything. We also did TV, we did radio, we had yellow pages up and, for a couple of years until we completely cut that out. So you have to have it's fine to have all these channels, but you want to track them, and you want to be, you want to be honest about it. Yeah. It's either working, not working, or it's part of the mix. Like for us, paid search was something that we could flex up and down depending on the season. And our private equity sponsors, they appreciated that we had the data and that we were making decisions based on the data versus just, well, I think. Mm-hmm. Or, I think Johnny's a good BD rep. Like we could dial it down to the per rep, who was being successful and who wasn't.
Totally.
Yeah.
Speaking of marketing.
Yes.
So with your military background, you're learning these tactics. What do you think is the most important military tactic in marketing?
Yeah, I think the easiest one that I write about in my book is called force multiplication. Force multiplication was something that a Prussian, 18th century Prussian general, Karl von Clausewitz, wrote about. And back then, he was using force multiplication to talk about how now we could, with cavalry troops, this is at the beginning of where you could start giving them carbines, guns. And he was like, well, while we've got this cavalry, which gives us speed and movement, let's also give them a carbine to go with their sword, so that when we're charging, it's not just a slash with the sword, but now we can also shoot. That was what he was espousing, and he had a mathematical formula for that. And it was X squared minus Y squared equals the advantage that a military has, meaning that if you have one soldier, right, and if you can put them on a horse, and if you can give them a sword and give them a gun, now all of a sudden your advantage is not just 1 minus 1. Mm-hmm. Like that potential is now squared. So now your soldier now has 3 weapon system versus just the one. But it's force multiplied. It's exponential. I use that exact strategy when I was at Foundations. I would go into our C-suite and our board, and I would explain, this is why we are going to be on Facebook. This is why we're going to be on, back then, MySpace.
Oh, yeah.
This is why we're also going to have a website, but we're also going to do paid search, because I was force multiplying what we were doing. We still had to create blog articles back then, just traditional SEO. But while I'm writing that blog article, I want to interview a staff member. So now I'm getting a quote from a real staff member.
Like a staff spotlight.
Yeah, exactly. And I'm going to take a photo of the interview to put on social. See, now I'm already having to do the work. I've already paid for it, but now I'm force multiplying it. I'm putting it on all these different platforms. Like von Clausewitz was espousing, that I've already got the soldier. Let's give him multiple weapons.
Right.
It was the same thing.
It makes sense.
The board and the C-suite understood that. If I had just gone in and said, well, I want to do social media because it's it's the hot thing right now, it would get me nowhere. But once I started explaining how, with data and how we were multiplying across the channels and how I was breaking that down in the budget, it was a no-brainer to do it. And that's how we went from, when I first started at Foundations, there were 3 of us in marketing. And when we sold to UHS in 2015, we had 30. I didn't go in asking for 30 people up front. We built it. And force multiplication was the very first one that I was able to successfully use. And it's a communication tool. It's a mental model. And having that military, it wasn't just something I made up, that it was rooted in military history, really gave it some gravitas. And people were like, I don't think I can argue with Lee on this.
Yeah.
He's quoting Karl von Clausewitz. It must be good.
It worked for him.
Yeah.
And it's going to work for you and your team.
Yeah.
Well, how do you grow, and 60 times growth? How do you grow without compromising ethics?
Wow, that's a great question. So one of the first things we did at Foundations was we created a statement of ethics for our marketing team. And we had it, I think there were 10 points. We had it on the website. So we had things like, we are not going to bid on competitor names. And I think it still happens. A lot of companies will bid. They'll use a competitor's trademark name or try to spoof. So we made sure that we were documenting what we would do. If somebody wanted to leave us a story, they had to be at least 1 year sober before we would take their story, because we wanted to make sure that they were solid in their recovery and protect their anonymity. And so we listed all these things that we were going, and so that kind of told anybody who was starting on our team that we were very serious in how we were going to go to market. We weren't going to take shortcuts, because in this business, and it's not just in behavioral health, it's in, I think, all marketing, there's always people looking for shortcuts. And we were making the statement that we were not going to do shortcuts. We were not going to do black hat tactics, when it comes to digital marketing.
Yeah.
And so I think that really set the standard. And private equity and our investors, they love that, because they knew that we were being compliant and that the risk was lower.
They want compliance, period. Because otherwise it's a huge red tape mess for them.
Exactly.
Right.
And you can see it, what happened in 2016, 2017. There were a lot of bad actors, and they had congressional hearings on it, with all the people in the behavioral health space that were doing unethical marketing practices, and beyond just the body brokering.
Yeah.
Like, that was a huge thing. But I mean, they were doing illegal and unethical advertising on the web.
Give me an example of that, because body brokering, a lot of people are familiar with.
Yeah.
And there's that movie that came out, Body Brokers.
Yeah,
That was just, it
the
really displays the disgustingness of
The
it
same
all.
thing happens online. And if you go today, you can type in like any treatment center, and I would guess that probably half the time you will see an ad. So I'll use the example of Cumberland Heights, who's been a client of mine for many years and great friends with them. But if you type in Cumberland Heights, you will see an ad that will say, thinking about Cumberland Heights, try us. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to use the Cumberland Heights trademark name, and they're trying to imply that they're either, they're somehow associated. And what happens in digital marketing is that a lot of people on their phones, they've typed in Cumberland Heights, they'll just see the first thing that pops up on their phone, which is an ad.
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking they're calling Cumberland Heights, but really they're calling this other place, which doesn't even provide treatment. They're a call center. They get you on the phone, and you're thinking you're talking to Cumberland Heights, and next thing you know, they're routing you to some other treatment center, right? And you'll get on the phone. And so that's going on still today.
Super effed up.
Super effed up. And that's why you have to be really smart when you're doing searching. Now, I think AI, it's going to be interesting to see how AI is going to handle that.
Yeah, I'm interested in all things AI.
Yeah.
Because it will be helpful. Of course, there's a downside to everything, but so you're talking about ethics, you're talking about storytelling. So with keeping anonymous names, people, how does a brand or a treatment center do storytelling and try to keep somebody anonymous, but also there's a fine line there. Maybe they want to share their story.
Yeah, I'm a big believer that anonymity is not secrecy. And so what I think is that for certain people, they want to be anonymous, and that's great. We need to respect that. But there are also people in recovery who are willing to share. And that takes a lot of different angles. It could be they want to share all the details, including their first and last name,
Right.
and their home.
Right.
And if they want to do that, then you need to have a platform that allows them to do it. Like for us, we would allow that, but they had to be at least 1 year sober, right? And we were also careful that we didn't want them revealing names of their therapists that were in our programs. We wanted to protect our employees also.
Yeah.
But we also had people that wanted to share, but they only wanted to give their first name. Totally fine. And so we were trying to meet people where they're at.
Right.
And then there were also a lot of people that didn't want to share at all, that they were really wanted to be anonymous, and that's totally fine. And so we just tried to make sure that we were keeping up with society, and that's where I came up with this idea that anonymity is not secrecy, because sometimes I think the secrecy, I think that sometimes can create some of these misconceptions about recovery.
Well, there's the whole recover out loud.
Yeah.
So you can help the sick addict that's alone and dying in the corner quietly.
Yeah. You know, Betty Ford, I didn't get to meet Betty Ford, but she was a big influence in the way that I approach marketing, because when she passed away, my team, this is back in 2011 or 2012 when she died, but we were sitting around in our marketing suite, and we were discussing her impact to the field of recovery, because she was really one of the first people that was able to share on a very large public stage, because she was the first lady, that she was struggling, with alcohol. What's fascinating is that was in 1974. What's fascinating is was that 2 years prior, in 1972, she was one of the first women that shared publicly that they were struggling with breast cancer. In fact, the news at the time didn't refer to it as breast cancer. They called it female cancer. So we were reading this and reflecting on her life. Look at how far breast cancer awareness in this country has come since 1972.
Yeah.
Susan G. Komen, all the races, the NFL wearing pink.
Mm-hmm.
Now,
this awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
Now look at recovery and addiction and substance use treatment. So that was 2 years later. She shared she's not, but we're still in the dark.
Mm-hmm.
People still think that we're just, that people are just drunks under the bridge and that we're no good, all this stigma. And so that's when we had this idea that we had to create Heroes in Recovery, because we felt like there are some people that want to share. And so let's create a platform where they can share. We're not going to force people. We're not going to say if you don't share, you're less. But for some people, if they want to share, let's let them share. And now you see today, you have lots of different programs. Faces and Voices of Recovery, the Anonymous People movie came out after that. I mean, I feel like, more people are willing to set up some of these platforms to share appropriately.
Right. Just like ours.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And having podcasts and talk, that wasn't around back then. And I still feel like there's a high stigma, kind of getting back to the judgment thing we talked about very early on. But I feel like it's making a positive impact.
I feel too. I mean, if what we do today, you and I, if we touch one person,
and don't you feel like the rooms are even more full today?
Totally.
So I feel like even when I still go to open meetings, they're pretty packed.
Mm-hmm.
that's a good thing. I mean, I guess people can look at it as, oh, well, we've got all these addicts, but no, I mean, it's a fact of life in this country that alcohol, and now with marijuana being legalized everywhere,
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
a fact of life that substances are somehow intertwined in our American culture.
Mhm.
And so we have to have programs where people, can find recovery because, it's funny. I was just in England and I was having lunch with Douglas McCann, who's the CEO at Castle Health in Scotland. They're one of the largest treatment programs there in Scotland. And we were talking. He goes, Lee, and I hadn't thought about this. He goes, Lee, you're the only country that tried abstinence. Like, you guys outlawed alcohol.
Yes, we did.
and I was like, I hadn't really thought about it that way. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's so intertwined, alcohol and substance, it's so intertwined in our culture.
I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin,
Yeah.
so I don't know if you've ever been there before.
No, but I watched
There's-
Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah, and they work at a brewery, right? So you look at Wisconsin, our baseball team, the Milwaukee Brewers,
Yes.
brewing beer.
Yeah.
There's 8 bars in every corner. Miller is from Wisconsin, Milwaukee, and they own like 80% of the city.
Yeah.
You're born with a high life basically put in your hand.
Yeah.
So it's so
Yeah.
intertwined in the culture.
Yeah.
And
And so
society.
that's where it's kind of interesting, isn't it, Johnny, that we have this stigma.
Right.
It's like we're going to judge people, but yet our culture is constantly pounding us that we need to drink, we need to use.
We
Isn't it
can't have
interesting?
billboards for our recovery.
Yeah.
And recovery can't own 80% of the city.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
not
really
fair.
fascinating.
So I do want to touch on Mr. Ross Perot.
Yes.
So you worked his campaign, and this was probably back in the 90s.
Yeah, 1992. I had just gotten married. My wife and I had gone out to Little Rock, Arkansas. My dad was stationed at Camp Robinson there, and I had just finished my officer basic course at Fort Knox, and we got married, and we went out to visit them. And my dad said, "Hey, Lee, I want you to come see this guy, Ross Perot. He's running for president." Now, I knew Ross Perot just peripherally, being a political science junkie, and it was a kid, but I didn't really know a lot about it. So we went to Little Rock, and we were at I think it was the Excelsior Hotel in downtown Little Rock. And all of a sudden, we're in the back, because there were thousands of people there, probably 5,000 or 6,000 people. And Willie Nelson was on stage opening for him. And I was so excited. I hadn't seen Willie Nelson. I was like, this is great. And all of a sudden, they announced Ross Perot, and they had fold-up chairs. And I'm standing on the fold-up chair trying to see all the crowd. And Ross Perot walks out from behind us. He comes out from the back, not from the front. And he's coming through, and it took him 20 minutes to get up to the stage. And everybody's shouting and taking pictures and shaking hands. And I was so impressed with his talk. And back then it was, we were, losing jobs. He was very anti-NAFTA. He everything he was saying, I was like, wow, because I'm kind of an independent person.
And he was running as an independent.
He was running as an independent.
Yeah.
And I was just super excited. And so I got back home to Knoxville, and, I had one more year of college to finish. And I just started a Students for Perot group. And I had been involved in politics, when I was a kid growing up. And so I knew kind of the basics. So back then you had press release, write a press release, and we faxed it to all the TV stations in Knoxville and radio. And all of a sudden I got a phone call from one of the TV stations that said, hey, would you come on TV tomorrow morning? We want to talk, because, it was kind of a dead news cycle. Okay. Tennessee was not competitive because it was Al Gore's home state. He was going to win big time. Yeah. So there wasn't a lot going on in Tennessee. So they were excited. So I show up to that and I talk about how we're starting a Students for Perot group. And they said, well, what's your phone number? I gave my home phone number. We didn't have an office. Yeah, By the time I got home to my duplex that we were renting, my answer machine was taped back then. It was full, 25 messages.
Oh my God.
This is all within, 20 or 30 minutes.
Word travel fast.
And they were watching it on the morning program that morning. And so you write every phone number down, you call people back. Next thing I know, we were raising money, and we just said, well, write it to Students for Perot, and we opened up a checking account. My wife had a friend that was a real estate agent. They donated an office space. Anyway, all this is just within a couple of weeks is just blown up. And we started doing things. We did a parade through Knoxville and got more people involved. We started making our own bumper stickers, our own shirts, because back then everything was very decentralized. You couldn't just call the Dallas office. And I tried to call the Dallas headquarters, couldn't get anywhere. Ross Perot, 4 of his kids went to Vanderbilt.
Okay.
And so there was a Nashville connection for him. He was also big into Tennessee walking horses. Some people in Nashville heard that there were some kids in Knoxville doing something. So they drove out, Steve Friedrich and Randy Campbell. They drove over to make sure we weren't doing anything illegal, that we were following all the Federal Election Commission guidelines, which we were. And they couldn't believe it. We actually gave them money. We're like, we got all this cash. Can you guys deposit it in the official account?
Unbelievable.
And so then, anyway, we had a great time, made some good relationships. And then after the election was over, obviously, we didn't win, but they were looking to hire somebody full time. So they hired me as the executive director, because Ross wanted to stay involved in politics at that time. And then when I graduated, they hired me and moved me to Dallas full time. So I was his youngest campaign staffer. And it's kind of I love telling the story because
and what year was that?
This is 92, so 93. I graduated
93,
in the spring of 93. He had started a citizen action group called United We Stand America, and then that transformed into the Reform Party, which was the third party platform that we used for him to run in 96.
Right.
Yeah.
That was going to be my next question. That must have been interesting.
Well, yeah, it was fascinating. I traveled 100% of the time, because we were going to every state. Besides setting up United We Stand America chapters, I was in charge of setting up it was basically, you had college Republicans and college Democrats. We were setting up like a college independent group. And so I traveled to, 100 colleges in my career. When my boys were looking for colleges, I was like, well, I can tell you about all of them. I've been to almost every one of them. But yeah, it was great because Ross and his team, they really empowered you. They hire great people and they let you go do your job, which is one of the things I write about in my book. They really apply commander's intent because, Ross was in the Navy and he had a lot of military people, that worked on the campaign and worked for EDS and Pro Systems. And they really do believe in giving you the order and let you go figure it out.
And the freedom. So you're
and the
not
freedom to pivot. Absolutely.
Okay.
And a lot of people have that misconception about the military, and I always found the military to be very creative. And I think that that's a common misconception. Like, we have standards, we have a lot of training, and you better do what you're supposed to do. But in the heat of a training exercise or a battle, you have to pivot.
You have to think creatively.
Yeah. And that's what a lot of my TED Talk, which you've seen, it's all about pivoting. And I think that sometimes we wonder, I'm 57, Johnny. I love working with millennials. I love working with with Gen Z and now Gen Alpha. And it's because I'll give them my commander's intent and they'll go do amazing things. I'm not micromanaging, but I think a lot of leaders, they feel like that's part of the job, that they have to tell you every single thing to do instead of get out of the way.
Yeah.
Mr. Perot was always big about get out of the way. He'll tell you what he needs done. Now, if you mess up, he's going to let you know.
Right,
He'll hold you accountable, but he wants you doing things.
How was he as a person? Because I imagine you got to spend some time with him, right?
For me, he was somebody that I like to emulate, as a leader. So a lot of things I learned, was listening and being in the rooms, and hearing how he operated.
What a team.
And he was very demanding. A lot of people, don't understand. Listen, this is back in the day where, he really, he wanted you there early. I used to get to the office at 6 a.m. And
he would be there?
He would be there too.
Oh my God.
He also was really big at, one of the things that got him, he would tell the story at when General Motors bought EDS. General Motors back then, they had their executive parking lot, they had their manager parking lot, then they had all their employee parking lot. Ross parked in the employee parking lot the first day, and he walked in. And he said security came running up and said, "Oh, Mr. Pro, you get to park up front." He goes, "Nope, I'm parking back here, walk in." And so he would walk in with the blue-collar workers.
Mad respect.
Yeah, and that fit in with my way of thinking because my father had enlisted in the Army and then gone to OCS, and that's what he encouraged me to do. And he was always big about lead. If you want to lead, if you want to lead troops, you need to know what they're dealing with first. And so I followed that same mentality. And one of my cousins, Brent's, we enlisted at the same time. He did the same thing. He enlisted and then went to OCS. And so I felt like that's also really important in how companies grow. Like I really respect CEOs who have worked their way up.
Yeah.
And I respect, when I go to treatment centers, I've been to treatment centers before where they have CEO parking right up at the front. And I always know, okay, they're either going to buy what I'm getting ready to kind of pitch them on, because that's not a good look, or but you can learn a lot about that.
Totally.
Yeah.
I'm thankful for those steps too. I started as a BHT.
Yeah.
And so, I was making $13 an hour as a 40-something-year-old.
Yeah.
And I worked I walked up every rung.
Yeah.
And here we are today.
Absolutely.
And I think I'm stronger and more wiser.
I totally agree.
So speaking on politics,
Yeah.
and this is off of all my questions, but just out of curiosity, I didn't get involved with even thinking about politicians at all or having an opinion until later on in life.
Mm-hmm.
And this is pretty much during the Bush administration. I grew up a punk rocker and anti-authoritarian.
Yeah.
So I'm just like really against everything that he stands for. Of course, he's changed a bit and started painting.
Yeah.
We all kind of like are rooting for the day of the George W. Bush presidency. But have you changed your mind on anybody over time that you were so staunchly against?
No. What's interesting, it's funny when you say Bush, because I'm thinking George H. Bush's dad, because that was my generation growing up. But certainly I'm familiar with George W. Bush, especially living in Texas. I think that, for me, I'm trying to think how I can couch this politically. I grew up very Republican. The first book that my dad gave me was Barry Goldwater's Conscience of a Conservative. I still have it. That was the first political book I read. So I grew up that way. But what's interesting about Barry Goldwater is that he was much more libertarian. So I think I've always kind of grown up a little more libertarian than I was Republican.
Slightly Republican.
Yeah,
meaning.
slightly Republican. And I think it really hit home for me in 1988. I was chairman of the College Republicans at UT when I was chairman for 2 years. And George H. Bush came to speak at our college. And all the advanced staff, they got in touch with the CRs because they wanted us to make sure they gave us all the tickets to make sure we filled, the front rows, and we had all the rabid college Republican folks there. And I remember working there at the downtown hotel, and we were doing all the paper, any kind of go for work. That's what they used us for. And I remember, like, after the event was over, everybody just left, and we were just kind of just left there, and it was kind of a little disheartening. Mm-hmm. Now I know he's the president and he's busy, but it was really interesting not to get any kind of acknowledgement or thank you for all the work you guys did leading up and this and that. And I was just kind of like, well, kind of felt a little used. Anyway, so I kind of, after my term was up, I wasn't really super active with the CRs then. And then I got to see, Perot. And what's fascinating about Ross is I went to so many different rallies and events where afterwards he would go meet with all the staff that made it happen, all the volunteers that had made it happen, people working the doors, the people that were doing the phone calls.
He was a real dude.
He was a real, and that's how he worked in his corporation too, because at Perot Systems, you would be in the cafeteria eating your lunch, and Ross might come and sit down next to you, and you'd be really surprised. That's just how he was. You see him in the hallways. He was just always around. So I say all that to say if I change my mind, I think I'm still at the core that young, more libertarian. I don't think I've changed.
Okay.
I feel like our society has changed.
For sure.
And I'm still trying to deal with, is it because of social media or is it because of news cycle? I don't know if I have a good answer on that, because I hate to blame social media for stuff. But I do feel like I'm still the same, and we've had this morphing, of both sides kind of to the extreme. So I'm still trying to figure out how do we find people that can talk about common ground, because I think it relates back to recovery. Mm-hmm. I think people that approach things with judgment, that is the big problem. And so,
Thank you for bringing it back to that.
yeah, because that's where I find, like, I volunteer for the Veterans Treatment Court here in Williamson County.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about that, because I was going to ask about
Yeah,
it.
that's an amazing program that was started 11 years ago by Ted Scalise, who was an Air Force veteran, and it's and Judge Tom Taylor, and it's an alternative sentencing court, almost like DUI court, but it's for veterans. And a lot of times veterans were getting in trouble, arrested, and it was because they lacked the services that they were owed or had never gotten enrolled in at the VA. And so take DUI as an example. They might get a DUI, but they had never gotten, services or treatment that's available to them. So Judge Taylor and Ted Scalise set this up so that they could apply to come into our court. They get 1 year of treatment, right, where they're going in an outpatient basis every week, coming in for therapy.
It's a blessing.
And we keep them out of jail. They still have to follow the program, and then they're assigned a mentor. So I'm a mentor. We have I think we have 16 mentors now. All of us are veterans, and we're just their buddy. We're there to talk to them every week. They check in. If they have any questions, we're trained. Like if they have an issue with housing or an issue with employment,
you can jump on it.
We can jump right on it, and we can advocate for them. And so, it keeps about 60 veterans a year out of our local jails. It's a lot cheaper to have them run through our program to put them in the jail.
That's wonderful.
And we get reconnected. They get reconnected, with the community and with their veterans brothers and sisters. And so that is a program that has wild support from both the left and the right in our county.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we're approaching it without judgment. We're saying, you know what, this population, and it's men and women, we're going to figure this out. And I feel like if more people would approach whatever the issue is without judgment, whether it's economics, immigration, I feel like we can develop the common ground.
Yeah.
Because it's not a Republican, Democrat thing.
Thank you for saying that.
And I feel like recovery's there. I feel like that if people could approach it without judgment, they would realize, oh, okay, maybe some of these decisions that I am thinking was just a personal decision wasn't so personal. And how can we provide help that will actually save the community money because we're getting people reintegrated into society successfully?
Also, giving them a better success.
Yeah, absolutely.
Of life. So speaking to veteran treatment, and as far as treatment goes, what can we do better for veterans?
Oh, well, there's probably a lot of things. I think to keep it, easier for, the people watching, the people listening, I think, we've covered non-judgment quite a bit. I think that there are a lot of veterans. We assume that when you get out of the service that you are, that you know all the benefits that are there, and that's not the case. Okay. The Army does an amazing job getting you onboarded. They know how to recruit. But when you're getting out of the service, they don't do a great job on that, right?
So they have no idea what their benefits exactly are, where to get them.
I won't say it's everybody doesn't, but there's a lot of veterans that don't know. They don't know what they're eligible for. They get out and they don't understand that there are all sorts of job training programs, that there are educational benefits, that there's health benefits through the VA. And that's what we find in the Veterans Treatment Court. It's like they come into the program and they didn't even know. They've never been to the VA. They've never registered.
So this is another step that you're helping them.
Yes. And I think that that's where when people listen to this, if they've got a family member who served, don't just take for granted that they know about everything that there is, because I can tell you just from firsthand experience, they don't. And there are so many wonderful programs out there that I think could help with the transition from service to the business world, the corporate world, or retirement. I just spoke at a conference in D.C. called the Veterans Ready Summit, and that was all about transitioning soldiers. And that was kind of new to me. Also, I'm like, wow, there are so many companies that want veterans, and it's just that. But sometimes they miss out on that connection, And I'll tell you, most of the ones that come through our programs, a lot of them have struggled with jobs, and purpose. Because they had a lot of purpose, they had great jobs in the military, then they get out after their 4 years, 8 years, 10 years.
What am I doing?
And what am I doing? Yeah. And I think that that's where we miss out, and I think that's where the community can help in fostering, you've served. We appreciate that. Let's help you figure out how you can serve our community.
Like, thank you for your service.
Yeah.
And now you're helping all these other men and women.
Yeah.
It's fabulous. And I hope you keep up with it as long as you possibly can. You've ran 4 Ironmans.
Yes.
Been part of 140 plus races.
Yes.
So how do you train for those? And then also, how have those races helped you in leadership?
Yeah, I think I love talking about this because when I got out of the Army, I told my wife I'm not running anymore. So when I came to her many years later and said, I think I'm going to do a triathlon, she was like, who am I talking to? And
Who are you, Lee?
Yeah. And I think that training for an event, whether it's a triathlon, and in triathlon, there are 4 different. There's a sprint, there's an intermediate, an Olympic distance, there's a half Ironman and a full Ironman. So to train for any of those requires some commitment and some discipline, which I think is not too far from recovery. Like you have to maintain your recovery. You got to maintain your training regimen if you want to do an event like that. So I've always felt like that was that, and I know a lot of people that are in recovery that all of a sudden kind of picked up this addiction of athletics too. So
that's a huge thing. Yeah, all of a sudden you see these guys in recovery that are working at treatment centers and they're friggin' jacked because they call that cross addiction, right?
Yeah,
but it's a good addiction, I guess, if you want to. Anyways,
but I think that for me, the discipline and I had a spreadsheet. So when I first got into doing my first sprint triathlon, I made a spreadsheet. And the first day that I went back out running, because I had not run, in 12 or 13 years at that point.
Wow.
And I used to always tell my wife, well, I play tennis. Totally different thing, But I couldn't run a mile, and that without getting completely out of breath. But I ran almost to a mile, and I got to this mailbox. I live in the country. And so the next day I went out, I ran to the next mailbox, and then the next mailbox, and the next mailbox. That was how
benchmarks.
That was I wasn't worrying about the distance. I was like, I'm going to go to the next mailbox. And I love telling that story because anybody can do that, whether it's walking, whether it's lifting, whether it's swimming, running, biking. You don't have to think about the total distance. You can just go to that next little marker. And I think that the incremental growth is what helped me build a solid foundation, which I think about that in recovery. You want to have a great foundation and just do it incrementally. You don't have to solve.
Out there. Just don't run a great 5 miles, not running. Yeah. Just take it a little bit at a time.
I'm always telling families when they call me, when you send your loved one to treatment, they don't come home fixed in 30 days. That's just trying to establish, can we get some solid footing?
Right.
It's just footing. It's just a little foundation.
Introduce a little bit of routine.
Exactly.
And change.
Yeah. This is a lifetime. And it's the same thing with training for an Ironman. It took me, the first year I did a sprint, the second year I did an Olympic, the third year I did the half Ironman, and then the fourth year I did a full Ironman. I didn't go out and try to do the the Ironman my first year or the first 30 days.
Right.
I had to build a great base and keep adding to it. And Steve Lee is a good friend of mine at Cumberland Heights. And when you talk to somebody like Steve Lee, I think he concurs. Like, you got to keep adding to it. Because what grows never grows old. A friend of mine, Noah Ben Shia, that's one of his quotes.
Thank you for that.
And I feel like that is, we have to continue to grow in our athletic endeavors. We have to continue to grow in our recovery. We have to continue to grow in our business, spiritual, family. Yeah, absolutely. So think about today, what are you doing to water, or to add some nutrients to that growth? And it can be incremental. It's like when I was writing my book, I had a spreadsheet, and I had to make sure that every day I was adding to it. If I added 10 words, okay. If I added 100 words, okay. But I wasn't judging myself. I was just making sure that I was doing something.
I have to write 20 pages today.
Right.
You're not giving.
I think that's what stops people a lot in recovery. They see this huge monkey they have that may have been going on for years, and they can't even think about getting it off their back in 30 days.
I cannot not use for 6 hours.
Yeah.
How am I supposed to go 6 years?
You're right. Right.
I mean, dude, 4 Ironmans and without even the 140 races.
Yeah.
It's incredible. And thank you for sharing that little piece of knowledge that
Absolutely.
might help somebody push themselves.
Absolutely.
So I do want to, but in closing, I do want to talk a little bit more about your book.
Yes.
So when we met at the National Marketers meeting, you gave everybody a copy, but
Yes.
then I got an additional copy from you for my father-in-law.
Yes.
Also, he was in the Air Force.
Yes.
And you signed it for him. Thank you
Oh,
very
good,
much.
good, good.
And we both have been reading it, loving it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But for the readers out there, for anybody that may be curious about this book, so Never Outmatched, and it's using military tactics in marketing. Let's say if somebody's not interested in marketing, or let's say they don't have any military background, they're not even really interested in the military or Army or whatever.
Yeah.
Why should they get your book? Why should they check it out, even with those two pieces?
Yeah,
out there?
I think that's a great question, Johnny.
Thank you.
I think that most people know somebody who is either in the service or does marketing or works in behavioral health, or they have a young person that I think this book is as much leadership as it is marketing.
I agree.
And so I think that even if you're not sure it's going to work for you, you might just pick it up and just peruse it and go, you know what? I think my son might like this, or my nephew might like this, or my niece. And so I think that that's one thing I would say is don't let the title, don't let my background be a barrier.
It's like the big book. It could be of use to somebody else.
Yeah.
That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that I tried to make this very accessible because less than 1% of our population will serve in the armed forces. And I don't say that as a judgment. That's just where we are with an all-volunteer Army. And so these ideas that I write about were native to me growing up in a military family and then being in the service myself. These were things that were kind of common ideas for me. I just translated them into mental models that anybody can use in their business. They don't have to have served. They can read this and go, oh, I see how Lee has translated this for me as a mental model that I can go in and use. And so that was what I wanted to share with the public at large, and to be an inspiration that way, because these are not just FOMO type stuff. This is not just stuff that, oh, it's just the hot thing right now. These are century-old ideas that when people ask me, what's the latest marketing book you're reading? I get that all the time. And I'll say, well, have you heard of Caesar's Commentaries on the Gallic War? I have that by my bed. And usually once or twice a month, I'm picking that up and rereading sections of it, because there's always something I pick up that Caesar was writing about that I go, I think I could use that.
It means something to you right now.
Yeah.
But it might have not meant something to you 5 years ago.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and then,
perfect.
and these, just because social media wasn't part of their world or the internet. I mean, I've been around long enough that my parents, when I graduated high school, gave me a typewriter. That was my high school graduation gift.
There's something sexy about that.
A lot of people have gone back to that, haven't they?
Yes, they have.
Yeah. And so, so I was pre-internet. So how does somebody who was born and grew up without social media, without iPhones, without internet, how is it that I'm now the chief marketing officer and doing all this stuff in digital marketing? And so it just shows that, kind of like what we talked about with the incremental, like you can continue to stay relevant and grow your knowledge base incrementally, and you can transition from, typing all my papers in college to, the internet and being involved in that. And then, you can do it. And that's why I say that there's always challenges. You just have to put your mind to it and say that no matter what, I will figure it out. No matter the adversity, I will figure it out.
I love that. And also this book, I think if somebody's reading it with curiosity, I never saw myself with leadership potential. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of people out there in the world that don't.
Yeah.
But I have been given little responsibilities and been trusted with more. So I think that this book would be a good tool for anybody that thinks they have no leadership potential.
Johnny, I think you're totally right.
Yeah.
It's interesting. In the military, so I was enlisted, and then I got commissioned, and I was a second lieutenant. And, all of a sudden you go from being enlisted to being, an officer, to being a leader. But you're at the very lowest rung. And what's interesting is the staff sergeants, they're still running the show.
Yeah. Yeah.
You might have some specialized knowledge or some leadership potential. They're still running the show. And I think sometimes people don't realize that those first jobs, I mean, my first job at working for Ross Perot, I mean, I was the lowest man on the totem pole. I mean, I think they saw potential. And I think sometimes, I'm encouraging my sons now, one who's graduating college this year and one who just joined the military. Like, just because you're not the CEO right now, you're going to be fine. You're going to be fine.
That's a very good
You just want to keep learning at every stage. You want to, what are you getting from it? Or what are you learning? And you're going to keep applying that and moving up.
And I think that goes back to earlier when you mentioned that if somebody's just entering at a CEO level, they're missing so much.
Totally.
Dude, thank you so much.
Yeah, Johnny,
for
thank you so
joining
much.
Today, Lee. Please, everybody, listeners out there, get at Lee Pepper. He's all over the internet. We're friends on Instagram.
Yep.
Check out his book, Never Unmatched. Outmatched.
Never Outmatched. You're fine.
Outmatched. Check it out because you can get it on Amazon. I saw
it's on Amazon. It's Barnes and Noble, Target. I mean, you can order it anywhere online. There's Audible editions. There's there's the digital edition. There's the print. The hard copy edition. Yeah, there's audiobook too.
Perfect.
That'll be the next episode. That was a 2-day ordeal going through that.
Yeah.
Read your book.
And it's read by you. Cool.
Read by me.
All right,
I
awesome.
wanted to do, this is a very serious effort that I put into this. This is not just, hey, let's just go log into ChatGPT and write a book. No, this was many years of thinking about this and then really sitting down over a 2-year process of writing the book and researching it. It's very well researched. I have a lot of notes in there. And so I didn't want it to I wanted it to be very serious. So that's why the publisher who I work with, Forefront Books, were very good at making sure that, everything was top notch.
Congrats on everything with the book.
Thank you.
Everything that you've accomplished in your life. I mean, it's really incredible. I wanted to try to fit all of this into an hour, and I know there's so much more to talk about. I'm glad.
Well, I'm proud to see what you guys are doing. You're so smart to be on to doing podcast. I mean,
thank you.
Even just the marketing side is super smart. But I think that so many people, younger people especially, they receive content in shorter formats today. And so what you're doing on the podcast, I mean, it can be chopped up and it will be consumed by so many people.
We do little snippet videos for each episode. And all it is to share something with the general public.
Absolutely.
Some inspiration.
Yeah. Well, you guys are doing a great job in helping to remove that stigma. And I think even the way you approach treatment, I mean, MAT many years ago was kind of like can't talk about that.
Oh, yes.
And so I think,
again,
removing the stigma and then understanding that for a certain population, it's extremely important.
It is. You can't help a patient if they're dead.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I say that all the time.
Yeah.
I've gotten kickback on MAT, virtual MAT, because some people don't, they think whatever they want to about the model.
Yeah.
But we are saving people's lives.
Yeah.
Are we a fit for everyone? Absolutely not.
Yeah.
We're a fit for the right people.
Right.
And if anybody's curious, please check out National Addiction Specialists. Please check out the podcast, Breaking Down Addiction, for more episodes. Like and subscribe. And please get at either Lee or I. And please be good to yourself, be good to your friends, be good to your family, and much love.
Great. Thank you so much,
Lee.
Johnny.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely.